That dink means we're on the air on YouTube. Super duper.
I didn't hear a ding.
That's all right. I heard it. Which is why it ends up on the podcast. So, all right.
Oh, okay.
Because
little boxes said we're live.
Because this is the pre-recording for the podcast and Radio Valencia, I have to silence you and start the bumper music. So if you guys can mute yourselves. Hello to YouTube if anyone is watching yet. We're going to start the show. Hope you're ready. Robinson, I can hear you chewing. Here we go. Whoa. Let's try that again. The fuck was that? Welcome to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. We are here tonight, as always, with my good friends, Chaz and Robinson. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
We're streaming to you live on YouTube currently, and if you're listening in the future, on Radio Valencia. And you might be listening via Radio Valencia on 87.9 FM if you happen to be in the San Francisco Bay Area. Otherwise, you might be listening to the podcast on iTunes. There's lots of ways to get this show. Like, that's just the goddamn truth. You can listen to it all over the place. I love it. So, welcome to the show. This is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. We are so happy that you have found us pre-recording because that's what we've decided to do. It's 10:09. We're a little bit late. We apologize to our viewers. Our viewer has been anxiously awaiting us for the last 9 minutes. We have let you down. We have let you down, and I have no apologies for that, only excuses. So, but we're on the air now, so don't hate us too much. If you are listening to the podcast via iTunes or any other podcasting method, as a matter of fact, we would love if you would take a moment, head over to iTunes or the podcast app if you use an iPhone, rate and review the show. We have quite a few reviews on the show now, and all but one of them are 5 stars. There's one that's 4 stars, and I know he's just he was just one of the he's one of those guys that takes a survey and he's like, I'm gonna give 9s because I don't give 10s, right? Nobody deserves a 10, and the reality is we probably don't deserve 10s anyway, but. So thank you to everybody who has posted a comment or left a review and was kind enough to give us 5 stars. If we don't deserve 5 stars, that's fine. We still want the feedback and the comments and the review because that's how we get exposure on iTunes. So take a minute out of your day, post a review, and we'll love you forever for it. So that's my speech. Oh, also, you can like us on Facebook. We are facebook.com/soberhappyhour. We have a more significant Twitter presence now than we used to. We are at Sober Happy Hour on Twitter. And we have a fantastic, yet small, but fantastic no less, Facebook fan page called the Sober Happy Campers. Sober Happy Campers is a private page for your anonymity. You have to request to be added to the group, but once you're in there, you can have a great conversation with other like-minded individuals. And one more piece of whatever the hell. We're going to start an Instagram page. Apparently that's all the rage with all the kids. Instagram. You post photos. Of what? I don't know. But we'll find things of photos of things to post, and we'll post them. It could be anything.
Can I post photos of my penis?
Only if it's next to like a lovely plated dinner or something. I think
What
Instagram.
if I put a little hat and a smiley face on it? Does that count?
Again, it has to be on a white plate. I think Instagram has rules. If
With
your
garnish?
penis is on a plate with a garnish, totally acceptable.
Okay.
Just a dick in your hand, probably not. That's what Snapchat's for.
Oh, gotcha.
So, again, thanks for joining us this evening. It's earlier. If you didn't notice, we used to do this at midnight. Now it's 10 o'clock. If you're listening on Radio Valencia, you're hearing last week's show. We're talking to you right now, next week. How weird is that?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that old time travel thing.
I know. No big deal.
Anyway.
So what the hell are we going to talk about, guys? Well, hold on. That's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fair. How was your week?
I don't want to talk
All right.
about it.
Robinson doesn't want to talk about it.
I had some great drives through our beautiful state. Got to different parts of it that I've never been to before, like all the way out in Eager, Arizona.
Eager?
Shout out to Yep. It's about 40 miles away from the New Mexico border. It's beautiful grassland. I drove back home through the White Mountain and San Carlos Apache Indian reservations, and I was nearly impaled by an elk that was just chilling in the middle of the road.
Oh. I thought you were
No,
almost
that-
impaled by an elk that was trying to have sex with you. It is mating season.
I was driving at night, and suddenly there's this gigantic elk with huge-ass antlers standing right in front of me, and if it had, I turned, nearly ran into the guardrail, and if it hadn't turned also and ran the other way, I would have clipped that thing.
What the hell was an elk doing driving a car?
Dude.
Wait,
I need the crickets. Where are the crickets? We need the crickets.
was he driving a Palomino?
So,
Or an an Impala.
there you go.
No.
You know, it was Impala. Again, with the crickets. God damn it. My jokes are tragic. If you had hit the elk, I would have asked that you strap it to the roof of your car and brought it to me, and I would have made delicious
Big mouth
elk.
beef jerky.
That meat mouth jerky. Get it right or pay the price. And we would have made some elk jerky. Would have been delicious.
That would have been great.
That's right. All right, you missed the elk. You avoided catastrophe. But there was another dangerous thing that you were doing while you were driving on that freeway, Chaz. Apparently, in the state of Arizona, there is the people of Arizona love guns so much that they even enjoy shooting them while they're driving. So if you thought people texting and driving was dangerous, people practicing their firearms skills and driving is way more dangerous. There have been like a dozen people shot by some asshole on the freeway who decided it would be fun to drive down our valley freeways, like popping caps at people. What the fuck?
Now, the person's shooting from a car? Because I thought they were just like shooting from the side of the road.
So originally that's what everybody assumed, right? They're on an overpass, they're hanging out on the side of the road shooting at people. But what they're assuming now, they're pretty certain this is what's going on, is the person doing the shooting is pulling up next to other people on the freeway and popping one off. Now, here, you want to hear my theory? I don't care if you don't. I'm going to say it anyway. So, here's my theory. Rachel likes this theory. I think that this guy or girl is a vigilante. All right? This person either lost a loved one or they're husband or their wife or their son or their daughter is now, crippled and in a wheelchair, something dramatic, or they're dead. And it was the result of being involved in a car accident that was caused by a distracted driver texting while they were driving on the freeway. Okay? You follow me so far?
I'm following.
So the person whose loved one was killed by the texting driver is now in this fit of rage driving up and down the valley freeways with his gun trying to find people who are texting while they're driving. And when he finds someone who is completely oblivious to the world around him or her, texting on their phone while they're driving on the freeway, he just pulls out his gun and goes, pow! That's the last time you'll be texting while you're driving on the freeway, you fuckwit.
For all we know, this guy could be saving people's lives.
Amen. He hasn't killed anyone yet. He hasn't even hit anyone with these bullets. I think he's trying to scare them.
I think he's trying to start a new trend. I think he's trying to create the drive-by shooting range.
The drive-by.
Well, it's taking the most dangerous, weapon known to mankind and then putting a gun in it. I mean,
but
really,
here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. So
cars and guns.
The reason my philosophy makes sense to me is because, okay, if these people being shot at weren't distracted by texting, okay, but here's the thing. We don't know. But if they weren't texting, wouldn't we have a description of a car or of the person? But because they were texting and completely oblivious to the world around them while they're driving, and this guy shot them and then sped away, they were distracted and have no idea that this was going on around them. Had they been an aware driver, somebody who was looking at the road and aware of what's going on around them, they would know what the car looks like, they would know maybe what the person looked like and what happened. But everyone that's been involved so far has been like, I don't know, I was just driving and I feel something shot me in my car. Because they weren't paying attention.
Have you considered that it's possible that he's driving the opposite direction?
Yes. So I thought about that yesterday. If he's in the HOV lane headed east, and he's taking shots, and he's like maybe in a lifted truck or a SUV or something and can see over the median, then he could be looking for people coming toward him in also the HOV lane and just going like, hey, look at you, coming up, and then just drives away, right? That could be happening too.
That seems likely.
But because he's always shooting the side of the car, I would feel like he would be more likely to shoot them in the windshield if he was coming at them. I still think he's pulling up next to people and shooting them while they're texting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
If none of them been shot in the windshield, that sounds more likely.
But I think of it, and it's like, if he's trying to prove a point, and it's that texting and driving, maimed his loved one.
The police should check the timeline on their phones and see if these people were texting and driving.
I would be surprised if they haven't, but we are talking about the Department of Public Safety in Arizona, so...
Is it still legal to text and drive in
Yes.
Arizona? Okay.
It is. And everybody does it.
I don't.
I do, and Rachel and I were talking the other day about how we really shouldn't. And so in the last few days, I have very much limited my texting to just, all right, I'm almost home, do you need something? Because the reality is, I'm really only texting Rachel while I'm driving. It's not like I'm having conversations with my buddies.
You can use a voice command. I mean,
Sure.
not the voice command, but the voice, the speech recognition thing instead of typing.
I do know that.
So,
I don't know. It's just easier to just go than it is to go, hey Siri, send a message to this person. Have it say, how are you doing? ? Will you be around later? ? I have some steaks to grill! That's just not as fast.
Okay,
Anyway,
we're 20
So
minutes
that's-
into the show.
that's what's
Are we?
exciting. No, not really. We're 20 minutes into the 10 o'clock hour.
I know. Well,
We're
now you've
15 minutes.
got crap to edit out.
We're 15 minutes into the show itself. We won't edit this out. This is a fantastic conversation.
All right.
So,
Current events.
Because he's
Current
probably an addict.
because he's probably some tweaker on the freeway, because that's what everyone is thinking, because people are bigots. And you know that's what people are either in Arizona. All the people watching the news talking about the freeway shooter are thinking two things. Either it's a tweaker or it's a Mexican. That's what Arizonans are thinking about this shooter. There is no doubt in their mind that it is a drug addict or a Mexican. And when it turns out to be some Christian white guy, their heads are going to explode, and they're not going to believe it.
It's too subtle to be a meth head.
I know, right?
You know,
It's true.
it just seems way too subtle.
Yeah, and it seems very. Robinson, the reason we're talking about this so much, this literally happened.
Mhm.
One of these shootings took place 5 exits off the freeway that I get off of to get to my house. The 51.
Yeah.
This is where it happened. I live off of that freeway 5 exits away from where it happened. Very close.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been kind of a big deal. And what was really funny is, you know, the big LED signs now on the freeway that tell you how long
Mhm.
it is to this exit, or if there's a
Yeah.
crash in the left lane.
They
They said,
now.
well, it said I-10 shooting tips with a phone number, and I could just see
Mhm.
some jackass like calling in the hotline and be like, I got some tips for how to shoot on the I-10. You need a silencer.
Maybe we should hack that site and tell them to listen to the show.
That's a great idea. We could get Johnny 5 to do it.
Have them call in and talk about it.
Perfect. So we have a couple listeners. We are in the YouTube page right now. If you want to post any comments, I'll post one right now. Watch this. It'll say, "Hi, viewers!" Exclamation
names?
point. I don't know. I don't know how to see that.
Oh, okay.
Huh. All right.
Well, I want to give a shout out to River Love. Thank you for joining our happy hour camp, sober happy hour camp.
Oh,
Sober happy camp. That's what it is.
it's the Sober Happy Campers.
Sober happy campers. She sent in a request, and I saw it and accepted her.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, shout out to you. So, this is not the current event hour. This is not the talk about technology hour. This is not the show people pictures of Chaz's bathroom tile hour. This is the sober happy hour. And we are here to talk about addiction, recovery, sobriety, and sometimes drugs. And Bananadyne. I had at least 5 people in the last week come either write to me or come up to me and be like, "Hey man, I loved the conversation you guys had about Bananadyne. That was hilarious." So that was the night you weren't there, Chaz. You were
Okay,
off,
all
you were
right.
off
I was
that
like,
night.
what?
Shows that Chaz goes back and listens to the show when he was not on. Way to sell yourself out there, Chaz. All right.
I don't listen to
a
the
single
show
episode.
ever.
So let's get down to business. Robinson was kind enough to come up with the topic for this evening, so I will let Robinson start. What are we going to talk about, Robinson?
Vulnerability. What is vulnerability? What makes us vulnerable? And how do we react to that?
And when we talk about being vulnerable or vulnerability, which I realized today is a very difficult word to spell, because we both spelled it wrong when we texted it to each other. There's like a silent U, and maybe Chaz is smarter than both of us combined, but I had no effing clue how to spell vulnerability. I struggled so much. I felt very vulnerable while I was trying to spell it. That wasn't a crickets joke. I was being serious.
I know, but it was funny.
And so yeah, aside from that, when it comes to an addict, when it comes to an alcoholic, somebody with a drinking problem or a substance abuse problem, I feel like being vulnerable can sometimes be a really difficult thing for them to achieve, right? So when we're trying to get sober, it requires a level of vulnerability. But I think there are so many people who are in a vulnerable position who unfortunately become addicts and alcoholics because they're taken advantage of during a period in their life where they are vulnerable. And we also joke about the idea of, like, for example, like a coke whore, right? We joke about, some coke whore in college who'll do anything for a line of coke. But in reality,
Coke
like
whore. I was like,
whore.
what the heck is a coke whore?
Coke whore. It's a type of
That's what
bird.
it sounded like.
Yeah. And I think vulnerability is involved in all of those things. So when you thought of the topic, Robinson, what were you thinking of?
Well, I was thinking about what vulnerability is and how we react to it. Vulnerability is the core of shame and fear and the struggle for worthiness. We all want to be worthy of being accepted amongst our peers. And the fear or shame that we're not going to be accepted is what makes us vulnerable. But it's also the birthplace for things like joy and creativity and longing and belonging, because when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, people do accept you. It's very rare that people take advantage of your vulnerability, but we don't know that because we're full of fear and shame about the things we do.
And knowing what we know about the incredible shame that can come along with an addiction, especially an active addiction, somebody who knows that they have a problem and is continuing to use, or maybe they've failed in recovery a few times. That shame can amplify that vulnerability by 100%.
Right, and we use things
1,000%.
like drugs and alcohol to numb that sensation that we're feeling. And then, because we're numb, or because we become addicted, we end up feeling more vulnerable and more shame and more fear that people are going to find out, and it becomes a cycle.
All right. What do you think, Chaz, from a psychological perspective? Does that make sense? Whoa, careful. Don't choke and die.
Sorry, edit me coughing out. I like what Robinson said about how vulnerability is kind of the potential for things like joy and discovery and all the other stuff. I really liked how you put it that way. And I think vulnerability is kind of the price that a lot of us pay in order to get that kind of, I guess you could say, revelation, or especially that acceptance that you were talking about, Robinson. It allows other people to see that you're human, that you also have flaws, that you also have struggles and things. And that really, I think, is what helps other people open up and also become vulnerable in your presence. It's kind of a sign of trust, really.
Agreed.
What it is.
Absolutely. And what's funny, I guess it's not funny. I don't know why I said that. Men, men tend, there's this macho, even now, 2015, where it's totally okay for, men to be in touch with their more feminine side, or to, wear nail polish, or to be involved in things that, were maybe more feminine 30, 40 years ago. Even now, though, I think men definitely struggle with being vulnerable, especially around other men. And I think that can be a really dangerous thing for an addict to, like, actively avoid. To actively avoid feeling vulnerable, to me at least, means that you're putting up a big wall and you're not letting people truly see inside of you. And when you're desperate for help, like an addict who's out there using, being vulnerable is sometimes the only way that you're going to get that help. You have to
Yes,
let people know that you're in a vulnerable state.
that's true. And it's just not very often that anybody would reject you for opening up and admitting your vulnerabilities.
And that's what drives me crazy about it.
In fact,
Because
I have found that women find it incredibly sexy when you expose your vulnerability.
I completely agree.
So if you're a player, use it.
Well, and if you don't understand why women think you're an asshole, it might be because you consistently refuse to open up to anybody. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, right? There's nothing wrong with even something as small as, not knowing something. I think on this show, on a regular basis, we all three at different times have the humility
Yeah.
to say, I have no idea. Like, this is what I feel, this is what I think, but I can't back it up with facts, or I have absolutely no idea what that means, what that is, or what that does. And I think that level of vulnerability is pretty shallow. That's like low-end vulnerability. But for an addict to admit to someone that they are struggling with an addiction, which, again, to a lot of the regular world, they still see it as a weakness, right? We talked about our now former presidential candidate saying that being an addict is a choice, that you actively made a choice to be an addict, in so many words. And I find that absurd, obviously. No one would choose that. Choices got you to the point where you became an addict, obviously. There were choices you made that got you there, but you didn't choose to be an addict. I find that premise just ridiculous. But it's seen as a sign of weakness. And so when you mix two weakness thoughts together, it becomes terrifying. I'm admitting that I'm an addict, therefore I am weak. And by admitting that I'm an addict, I'm making myself vulnerable, which puts me in a position of weakness. Those two things could be very frightening to someone who's not used to feeling vulnerable. And to be clear, I don't feel that way about those things that might have come off like I think being an addict is a sign of weakness, or that being vulnerable is weak. That's not, I'm saying others might feel that way. So what do we do?
What do we do? Yeah. Well,
How can
it's an
someone
exercise.
comfortably make themselves vulnerable?
Well, they
I
already are vulnerable. It's how
sure.
they react to that vulnerability
I
that
don't think it's possible.
causes them to withdraw.
Okay.
For instance, the guy who wants to have sex with his wife, but he's afraid she's going to say no and reject him. So for him to have to ask if he wants to have if she wants to have sex with him, he has to make himself vulnerable to the possibility of rejection.
I told you that story in confidence, you bastard. So, and that's a great example
Yes.
because it's a simple example, and I think a lot of people, whether you're married or not,
Or
you
even
do
just
this
asking someone on a date,
right.
you know,
Hmm.
or seeing someone in a bar or something, or that you or a cafe, and you just feel like, hey, maybe here's a connection. This person is doing something or has, something about them that I feel a connection with, and I want to go and exchange words, but we don't because, especially in the U.S., because we are rejected, and that's another big problem I think that we have in the U.S. is the power, the sexual power struggle between men and women, and that men, more specifically, are more vulnerable, feel more vulnerable because so many women hold the keys to whether or not there is going to be an exchange. I've said hello, and it's taken me a lot to get over my vulnerability and fear of rejection, and many times approached someone and said, "Hi, I really like your hair color or whatever, just like that looks really good on you. I just wanted to give you a compliment." And I'd say about probably 9 times out of 10, they look at me like I'm some kind of a freak, a stalker, or whatever. And they say, like, leave me alone, you dirty old man. And I'm like, oh, God, now I feel like a complete piece of shit
Right.
because I just been shot down. I didn't do anything. But, at this point, I don't really care anymore. If I feel like giving someone a compliment, I don't want anything back. I'm just giving it just to give it. And then I walk away.
Well, and
Nice hair. See ya. Don't give them a
there's
chance to react. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
and there's two sides to that though, right? I mean, let's be honest. You might have totally benign intentions there, where you literally want to strike up a conversation with someone new because you enjoy having conversations with people.
Yes.
But far too often, you have women who are, especially attractive women, who are constantly hounded by sleazy guys trying to pick up on them. And so they've built this defense mechanism of being rude or standoffish or blowing you off when you come to compliment them on the shoes that they're wearing. Hey, those shoes, they're fantastic. I really like them. Uh, I just wanted you to know I think you're very beautiful. And immediately that woman goes to the place of, he just wants to get in my pants. What a pervert. I have a boyfriend. Leave me alone. As opposed to, oh, wow, thank you. This is the first time I've worn these shoes. I was nervous to wear them. I didn't know how they would be received. Thank you so much for saying that. And then you tip your hat and walk away. Unfortunately, that's not how all of those exchanges go. Because if she opens up and says, thank you so much, I like these shoes too, then sometimes the next thing out of the guy's mouth is, sweet, can I buy you a drink? And now shit can get muddy. What does that mean? What are the implications? Whatever, whatever. So, how does this tie back to addiction? Well, if I share with someone else that I am an alcoholic, especially when I'm still out there drinking and I'm looking to get help, and I go to a 12-step meeting and I'm struggling and I break the ice with someone, and I'm supposed to share that I'm an alcoholic, but I'm nervous too because the same kind of thing can happen, right? Well, I'm struggling. I feel like I might have a drinking problem. I'm finding it really hard to give it up. I tell myself every weekend that I'm done drinking, and then the very next day I'm back drinking again. Uh, I'm just trying to see what I can do to fix this problem. Now, a good recovering alcoholic who's truly there to help others would respond very openly, very honestly, and be like, "Hey, man, I've been there. I know how you feel. And if you keep coming to these meetings, you might learn something, right? You might be able to kick this thing. But the most important thing that you can do right now is to just not pick up a drink tonight." But then you might have another alcoholic who's there out of narcissism and their own sense of self-worth, and the conversation would be very different. "Oh yeah, man, you're totally an alcoholic if you can't stop drinking, and I'll tell you, I've been sober for 20 years, and you got to read that big book, and you got to give your life to Jesus, because if you don't have Jesus, you're going to drink." And now you're like, "Holy shit, why did I even bring it up?" And now he's asking me for my phone number, and he's telling me he wants to give me a ride home, and he's asking me about my life, and "Did your dad touch you when you were a boy? Is that what this is about?"
Mhm.
You're like, "Holy shit." So I think a lot of people, when it comes to vulnerability, have been burned. I think everybody listening and everybody in this virtual room right now can say that they have been burned by vulnerability at some point in their life, right or wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chaz,
Yep. Hmm.
do you remember a story?
Can't think of one right
Anyone?
now, but trying to think.
Well,
Like of a vulnerability going wrong or something.
so here, I'll ask you a question.
Mm.
When you found out that there was a name for what it is that you had going on up here in your
Mm.
cerebellum. Is that where your cerebellum is? I don't know. But when you
Part of your brain,
realized
yeah.
that there was something off, either
Mhm.
about the way that you were feeling or thinking or whatever,
Mhm.
obviously that subject had to be broached at some point, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Was it you that brought it up? Was it a doctor that brought it up? Were you alone? Were you with your family? Were you like, because in that moment, I would imagine you were feeling very vulnerable. And you either had the opportunity to put up a big wall and say, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about, please fuck off." Or you had the opportunity to say, "Wow, all right, you just totally rocked my world with some reality. Let's talk about this." How did that go?
So
What
my
did that look like?
well, it really looked like entirely like none of those. What it
So just
was
make
was
up a story then and make it interesting.
no. This actually finding out what it was an amazing relief. That there were actual words for it, and that I was the one who found those words. Um, and it was when I was much younger, very much, long before I was diagnosed with anything. And I, people pretty much told me, "No, you're not. You're not. You're not. You're not. You don't have anything. You're just pretending, or you're just maybe depressed or something." And finally, after a while, I just shut up. I was
Mhm.
just like, "Fine, I'll just, be a total, you know, I don't know, freakish asshole," is basically the best way to describe me back then. Being that, and said, "Okay, yeah, so no one's going to help me. I'll just do whatever." And it wasn't until later on that finally, something had to happened. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and really no one else noticed anything, except for me, certainly. Uh, and that was an extreme experience of vulnerability. I mean, that was being in a place where I felt I was like going to die. Um, but ultimately, I regard it as a positive experience.
Okay. And that's great because I think had it gone another way, it's possible that it could have taken months or years or decades longer to get help.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was kind of a told you so moment for me to everyone else. Like, yeah, I told you there was something up. And ever since then, though, that's when really the recovery part of it started. And I've been still going strong for what, 2000? Like 16 years almost? Yeah.
Wow.
Me
I could give
too.
you that applause button.
But you can't find it.
No, it's right here.
Oh.
No, here, we'll do this one. That was your success button. 15 years. So, when it comes to vulnerability, I want to make it very clear. Being vulnerable is not a bad thing. If anything, it can start the most honest version of the process that could get you better. And if you spend your life avoiding that feeling of being vulnerable, even though you know and everyone else knows where you're at, you will push away and avoid help for much longer than you need to. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that touches home with me. As you know, I have had to deal with narcolepsy my entire life. And it wasn't only until about a year before I met you that someone that I ex exposed myself to. I mean, she was my girlfriend and she could see it and she, brought it up to me and uh, convinced me that being vul I spent my whole life hiding it, and I found great ways of hiding it, just like an alcoholic would hide their drinking or a drug addict would hide their abuse, whatever.
How? I want
With
to hear
pot,
how.
well, I with my narcolepsy, I have about a 2-minute warning. I feel a sensation that comes over my body. My skin gets all tingly, and my muscles start to get weak, and I know it's going to happen. And so whatever situation I was in, I would excuse myself and leave the room and go and have my episode and come back. Sometimes it would happen in the middle of sex,
Hmm.
and I would have to stop what I'm doing and just, like say I have to go pee, and then, whatever. Um, uh, but um, but what what I didn't understand was that by not exposing this to everybody that I meet made me more vulnerable. It's a harder word to say than it is to spell.
No
Um,
way. Not a chance.
so so
Vulnerable.
it was Beth, who I'm sure you remember Beth.
Oh yeah.
She
She hates being called Beth Robinson.
she hates being called Beth.
It's Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth. She's the one who basically told me that pointed it out to me that I make myself more vulnerable because if I have an episode and nobody knows what's going on, shit, they could call an ambulance because they think I'm like dead or on drugs or some weird shit's happening.
Yeah.
So weird shit can happen, and it has happened. There's been times when I was doing some job where I'm like canvassing the streets, giving free samples of shit, and I have an episode. I just sit down on the curb, put down my stuff, have my episode, and I wake up and there's a whole fucking crowd of people standing around me and an ambulance pulling up, and I'm like, holy shit, oh my God. You know, had I just told my crew that I was with, hey, by the way, I have narcolepsy. If you see me falling asleep, I'll be okay in about 10 minutes. Just keep an eye on me. You know, I was afraid of that. I was too afraid that people would think I was a freak. So
One
I
of
never
the
told anybody.
one of the first times that I ever met you in person, we were in Costa Mesa at your shop, and we were there with a couple of people. Not it was only like two other people, so there was maybe a total of four of us. And I didn't know Robinson very well at the time. We'd only met maybe once before, and it was the middle of the day, and Robinson owned and operated a piercing shop, body piercing. So we're at the shop. We're all hanging out. We're talking. I'm considering getting my ears pierced or something like that. And all of a sudden, this person I barely know says, "Hold on a minute. Give me just a minute." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. He's got to use the bathroom or something. Whatever." He gets up from this couch. And it was a very squishy, kind of red, plush, maroon-colored couch. Kind of felt like microfiber almost. But the cushions were really broken in, and you would kind of sink into the couch. It was very comfortable. And he gets up really quickly from this couch, and he goes not out of the room to like go use the bathroom in an emergency, which was what I assumed was going on, but he goes to lay down on the piercing table, which was like a massage table. And he goes and he lays down on the massage table, but not like on his side and curled up in a fetal position. He lays down flat on his back with his head flat on the table like a dead person, puts his arms around his body like Wednesday Addams sleeping, and just head turns to the side slightly and falls asleep for like 10 minutes, maybe longer. And me and these three other people are looking around at each other going like, does he think this is funny? Is this a gag, like a joke? Is he playing with us? Is this guy crazy? Is he on crack? Like, what is the matter with him? And then Robinson, I don't mean to embarrass you, but Robinson snores really loud. And so for the 10 minutes that he's asleep, he's snoring. But the snoring that Robinson produces is loud to the point that it almost sounds fake. Like it's comically loud. And so he's snoring for 10 minutes, laying like Wednesday Addams on this piercing table in front of a bunch of strangers, and then snaps out of it, wakes up, gets up, kicks his legs out in front of him, stands up, walks back over to the plush couch, and sits back down and continues the conversation. And acts as though nothing had happened, except when we all are looking at him going like, are you going to explain what just happened there? He goes, oh, I have narcolepsy, I'm sorry. And we all just kind of go, huh, that's weird. And we went about our business and continued the conversation. So I have a friend that I work with who suffers from incredibly severe vertigo. Now, I never fully understood or knew anybody with vertigo. I'd heard of people saying, oh, I have vertigo, I feel dizzy sometimes, right? No, true vertigo is fucking terrifying, apparently. And this man will seem fine, and very similar to Robinson's episodes, will start to look a little loopy, like you know something's not right with him, and then all of a sudden, he will, and I don't mean to laugh, he will literally just, like a dead tree, he will fall the fuck over. You ever seen those videos where they shoot a bear with a tranquilizer dart? and they're like hanging on the electrical pole, and then all of a sudden they get shot with a dart, and like 30 seconds later they're like grumbly, and then they just go, and they just fall off of the tree or off the pole. This is what he looks like, and he just lands. But because of the vertigo, he starts to what looks like convulse, right? He's like shaking violently. It's not a seizure, it's not a convulsion, it's his brain thinks he's spinning like he's in one of those Orbitron rides at the fair, spinning like 1,000 miles an hour, and he tries to find the nearest thing to like grab onto for dear life, and that's usually another human that he has to like hold on to. And it's terrifying. The first time I saw this happen, I'm like, oh my god, somebody call an ambulance. He's having a seizure. He's going to fucking die. And everybody else that had worked with him for a while was like, meh, he's fine. I'm like, how can he be fine? The guy's having a grand mal seizure. He's about to die. He's going to have brain damage, and you guys are standing around like a bunch of idiots. Call a doctor. But then I find out, no, I got vertigo. Sometimes I fall down. It's like, all right. But it probably took him years to come to terms with it and be cool with having an episode in front of people and realizing, like, hey, guess what? It's no big deal. I wonder if the same is true for my grandmother. My grandmother, we lovingly refer to her as Omi. She is insane, but she has a serious flatulence problem. And she will just be walking around the kitchen making dinner and just ripping farts all the time. And I'm wondering if it's the same thing. For years she tried to hide it, and then eventually she just came to terms with her flatulence and feels comfortable releasing her gas in front of anyone who might be around, even if she's cooking them food. That, my friend, is being comfortable with your vulnerability.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at that point, Robinson, since you said maybe a year before you met me was when you had gotten more comfortable with your narcolepsy, what did it take to get to that point where you felt more comfortable being open and honest about this after realizing that hiding it was more of a detriment than it was actually
Research.
protecting you from anything? Research. Okay.
I started doing research. I started, I went on the computer and I started just, doing as much research as I could. I found documentaries about it. I talked to doctors about it. I actually got diagnosed for the first time. God, that was when Sabina was probably, well, I think it was just before Sabina was born. It was when I officially got diagnosed, but still kept it a secret. Because the only thing the doctor could do for me was prescribe me Ritalin, which I refused to take, because that causes vertigo. So I'd rather have my narcolepsy than vertigo. And the more I learned about it and learned that there are many different types of narcolepsy, and and then the more I talk to people about it, the more people expose their vulnerability to me, saying, yes, I have narcolepsy too. How do you deal with it? And I just said, this is how I deal with it. I tell people. And they're just like, wow.
Which is why the concept of a support group makes so much sense in the world of addiction recovery.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if you're dealing with something strange, narcolepsy, vertigo, a drug addiction, alcoholism, a chemical imbalance, having the opportunity to speak with other people who experience or have experienced the same thing makes it feel less strange. It removes you from the island that you've placed yourself on, and you are no longer the weirdest person in the room. Everyone else is experiencing or has experienced the same thing. So it's kind of funny because we live our whole lives thinking we're so damn special, right? I'm so unique. I'm a snowflake. But the truth is that most of the weird shit that we are into, or the weird shit that we've gotten involved in or had to deal with, other people have dealt with too. And people of like mind who get together sometimes, especially when it's a support type situation, can be a beautiful thing. It really can. Even for something like narcolepsy that gets depicted. And it's funny because it's the same kind of thing, right? You look at something like bipolar disorder, and it's depicted in television and movies as like this crazy person who just goes off the rails and acts crazy. And then they're sad and they cry all day and they can't be consoled and they rock in a corner. Narcolepsy. I think of the movie Deuce Bigelow and the chick with narcolepsy who can't eat soup because of the drowning danger, right? And it's like that's not how bipolar really is. That's not how narcolepsy really is. You're not gonna fall asleep in a bowl of soup and drown, right? You know your episode is coming on. People don't just have narcolepsy and just they're in the middle of a conversation and just like click, they fall asleep. It doesn't work that way. Just like drug addiction. That doesn't mean because you're a heroin addict that you're robbing your neighbors and you have HIV from sharing needles with people.
It doesn't mean that that's not true,
Sure, those things can exist.
but in most cases, it's just a thing.
Right. There was a guy at my work a couple of days ago that a customer that I was talking to pointed out as being like really fucked up. This guy, he was like wearing sunglasses and he was trying to stand up, but you could just see like through the sun. This guy was fucked up. And I know well enough, he wasn't like stoned, he wasn't drunk. This dude was rockin' high, doped up on either painkillers or heroin or had just smoked a pipe full of opium. This guy was jacked.
It's probably
And
Bananadyne.
it was Bananadyne. Actually, I found out later. No, I'm just kidding. But even the guy that I was working with, clearly, this random person doesn't know me from Adam, but he points this guy out and be like, "Whoa, bro." He's like, "Look at that dude. What a loser. He's so high right now, he doesn't even know where he is. Like, he should be embarrassed of himself. He should be ashamed to even be in public. Clean your life up, you scumbag." And I'm listening to this guy going like, Jesus Christ, you judgmental piece of shit. Like, look at you. Who do you think you are? But I'm trying to keep a happy face, like, oh, yeah, oh, haha, funny, funny. And this guy, this totally whacked out guy, is probably like a full-blown junkie who really needs help, not people pointing at him saying, wow, look at this scumbag loser. I don't know.
That's the 1% of those people that are douchebags that make us fear our fear, our condition, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And fear and feel the shame that make us do the things that we do.
The
Because of
hiding,
that guy.
the shaming, the fear.
Yeah, and I mean that's retarded.
It's disgusting.
You should have punched that guy in the face.
I should have.
No, you should have at least punched him in the neck. But
I could have probably accidentally punched him in the nuts. And just been like, oh, sorry. I have a twitch. My fault. Hit him. Yeah, hit him in the nuts with an iPad. Just been like, oh, oops, didn't see you there. So yeah, vulnerable.
So exposing your vulnerabilities is a really good thing. It's the best way to get help. When people know, they will help. There will always be that one douchebag, but you know what? punch him in the neck and move on.
Yep.
Because he's a douchebag and you're not. You're vulnerable. You're not a douchebag. He's probably a douchebag because of his own vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Chaz, you had something to say.
Yeah, I was going to give kind of a example of what it's like with extreme states when I don't say chemical imbalances.
I'm so sorry. What do you call them?
I forget you. Extreme states.
Well, but is that not the result of a chemical imbalance?
No.
No?
It's just all the way that I understand it and the way I explain it is just brain states, and these are extreme brain states.
Huh.
So
All right.
the way that it works, in this situation, like with my situation, Robinson, you can feel it coming. You know it's coming. You can go and take care of it. Do whatever you need to do. I know my rhythms as well. I know when mine's going to flare up and when it's not. I can tell just by the time of day, how I'm going to react to certain things. Like in the morning, when I wake up, it's pretty much not even me until about an hour or two after I've woken up. There are people in my family who still have not understood this. Even after knowing me for 33 years, they have not figured out to just leave me alone in the morning and I'll be fine. Because otherwise I will scream and yell at you, not because I hate you or not because I'm mad or anything, it's just because there is no filter, there is no wall up at that time. It takes a little while to get into the rhythm of the world. I mean,
that's your brain state. Yes, that is your brain state for the first hour of your day. It's just
but
the way it is.
They think that you're just being lazy and that you were up too late the night before and you don't want to get up.
No, just I'll be up. I'll just be like, leave me alone type thing. I'll just be very standoffish, just very, and I'll snap at someone, but really
Sure.
it's honestly, I even when it happens and they get all back at me, I'm like, look, just stop it, don't try and interpret looks on my face, don't try and do anything like that. It's just some folks will never see it but then that is what I recognize as, coming from that brain state, because I was just asleep, and now I have to come into an entire different thing, and because the way my mind works, it takes a while to get all rearranged as far as, how everything's firing inside. But it's really hard to explain that to someone, saying like, God, I have bipolar, or whatever, and that gets looked at completely differently. Because then you're just looked at like crazy, or you're looked at like you're blaming your bad behavior on it. And that's why I've taken it away, and there's no it to blame anything on. It's just normal. It's natural. Right. That's the way it is. And so it's like during these hours, just completely ignore, or whatever I say to you, just do not take it to mean anything at all. It's not personal. It's just because that is how I am at that time, going like for about an hour a day. So that's how it looks like. That's what it looks like with me.
I thank you for sharing. So we're coming up on exactly an hour. I think I feel really good about how we've covered this concept of vulnerability and how it relates to not only addiction and recovery, but kind of just life in general. That people deal with their differences. People deal with their, what I lovingly refer to as their weird shit every single day. And if you can't accept your own weird shit enough to be open and honest about that weird shit with other people and understand that those that care about you and that are worth caring about aren't going to judge you. Right? There's a saying that in like relationships, if he's worth your tears, he'll never make you cry.
Awesome.
That's cool.
It's the same kind of thing with this. If you're worried that a person in your life is going to judge you or not accept you for the things that make you who you are, whether that's your recovery or your brain state or your narcolepsy, then that person's probably not worth being there. And you should punch them in the neck.
They're the one that's not worthy, not you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, whatever your thing is that you are feeling vulnerable about, there is probably a positive side to it. I have discovered since I've come out, if you will, that instead of like trying to hide it and pretending that I don't have it, I just embrace it. I allow it myself. I even have techniques to go into my episodes quicker so that I can just get out of it quicker. Certain things that I focus on, and or the way I'm laying or whatever. But what I've discovered is that if I'm working on an idea, a thought, a project, and I've come to a stumbling block, 9 times out of 10, I solve my problem in my episode. Because my brain is now taking a break, and all the stress and everything of all the parts to the puzzle that I'm trying to shove together can suddenly just flow because I'm not struggling anymore. So it's just become a positive thing. So think about that and whatever it is that your vulnerability is, and search for the positive side of it. Because there's got to be one. There's got to be a reason that you have this.
Even if that reason doesn't seem inherently positive, dealing with that situation, being honest with yourself about it, being honest with others about it, will always yield something positive. I truly believe that.
I'd have to say that the one thing that I've gained from it is just an incredible insight into who I am. An incredible way of understanding my whole inner working and everything else. Just being able to turn around and really examine it, really examine myself and the whole inner workings is just extremely profound. And I don't think I would have had that had I not needed to look.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And at the very least, I know in my case, with narcolepsy, as well as things like Asperger's or Tourette's, it always leaves funny stories.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
If you could laugh at yourself about your vulnerability, then people will laugh with you and not at you.
Even alcoholism and drug addiction, if you are real enough about your own recovery, you should be able to look back on the crazy, fucked up shit that you might have done. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. And look back and say, wow, what an asshole I was. And when you can put the was, when you can put it in the past tense, hey, everything's good.
That's a major step right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's take a break. This is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. We're going to play a little tune for you. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Sober Happy Hour. SoberHappyHour.com is how you can get to the blog. If you, for some reason, have no ability to download the podcast, you can catch all the shows right there. Subscribe on iTunes. Join the Sober Happy Campers on Facebook as well. And we'll let you know when we join Instagram, because we expect to do that very, very soon. We'll be back in just a little bit.
Yeah.
This is
And if you're wondering what's next, you'll find out.
That's what we're going to talk about.
What's next?
What's next?
Yeah.
This is a song called Fly.
Yeah.
Don't let me in. Shoot me down. Pull off the skin. See what's down. Look up. Look high. Look what was right. I say this life to lose in everything I play. This life to know what's around. Too much to fly. My life and what it's all about. Come break me in. Cool me down. Rip out what's in. Kiss love around. And I break this life. One note at a time. Too much to fly. My life and what it's all about. To bring me down, to fly. Bring me down, to fly. Bring me down, to fly. This life, one note at a time. Too much to fly. My life and what it's all about. Bring me down, to fly. Bring me down, to fly. Bring me down, to Welcome back to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. That was a little song called Fly off of a record that was recorded at some point. There's the video stream. So, we spoke the last hour about vulnerability and its place in your life as a recovering addict, as a using alcoholic, as somebody dealing with a psychological issue, or something as interesting and misunderstood as narcolepsy, and the kinds of things that come from embracing that vulnerability and being real not only with yourself but with the people around you. So if you're tuning in live and you want to hear what that conversation sounded like because you missed the first half of the show, the podcast will premiere next week and you can catch it there, or you can start this show over on YouTube and watch it from the beginning. We're going to spend the next portion of the show discussing a topic that I think could be extremely helpful to people that are currently in recovery, or who are considering recovery, right? Those that are struggling with the concept of removing their addiction from their lives. And I don't specify drugs or alcohol because we've talked about it plenty of times. We had a fabulous interview with our friend Mario about an addiction that he struggles with, that he is in recovery from, which is food. We need food to survive, and yet there are those of us struggling with eating disorders or an addiction to food, even when we see it physically changing our bodies in a way that we don't like. Go back and listen to that episode. Download the podcast. Subscribe to the Sober Happy Hour on iTunes, and you can listen to that live interview with our friend Mario. But for the next little while, I'd like to talk about what's next. What's next? What comes after you take the plunge into recovery? Because I think there's a lot of ambiguity around that. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. And I think that it's a little bit different for everyone. But I also think that for the most part, when you get clean, when you choose sobriety, when you're in recovery, there does come a point in time where your life can go back to normal, or whatever normal means to you. This process of recovery, this life of sobriety, doesn't have to be the center of your life for the rest of it. You can get to a point where your recovery is part of your life. And yes, your sobriety should always be an important part of your life. But it's kind of like the respect that a cook has for his knife. The moment you stop respecting that knife, my grandmother used to say this, the moment you stop respecting that knife and what it's capable of, you will get cut.
True.
And I took that to heart even before I attended culinary school. And when I watched friends and peers of mine get maimed by razor-sharp kitchen knives, I thankfully stayed safe because I never lost respect for what that knife was capable of, and it was capable of pretty nasty shit. I watched some ER visits happen over some joker who got a little too comfortable with his chef's knife. And the same goes for recovery. If you start to lose respect for your sobriety, you will relapse. But it doesn't have to be at the center of your universe at every moment of every day. And that could take months or even years for people to get to that stage of enlightenment, if you will. I was just listening to a podcast about Nirvana, not the band, but the state of Nirvana, and how Buddhist monks will spend decades trying to reach this place of enlightenment. And it's kind of the same thing with recovery. Everybody's different. It takes everybody a different amount of time and different experiences and different goals and different achievements and failures and false starts to get to that place where their sobriety no longer has to be the center of their universe. So when you get sober, when you're in recovery, what's next? And
Yeah.
I'm
What's
so
the
glad
plan?
that you but I'm so glad that you brought this up, Robinson, because something really interesting is happening in my recovery tomorrow. So, for those that know me well, they know that I have been an enormous fan of a musical group for the last 15 years of my life or longer. And I used to see this band perform sometimes multiple times per year, sometimes multiple times per month if they were in town or even out of town. And this band meant a lot to me, still does. But the last time that I saw this band perform, I don't even fully remember the second half of the performance because of how drunk I was. So tomorrow, it just so happens that a good friend of mine, if you're listening, Kurt, thank you so much, scored me some tickets to see Dave Matthews Band at the amphitheater in Glendale.
Oh, you're one of those guys.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. I have a Dave Matthews Band tattoo right here. And say what you will, I don't care. The point is, the last time I saw this band, I was actively out there drinking, and drinking too much. And I'm going to see this band tomorrow night. And I haven't seen them in this many years, not because I told myself that going and being around those people and the pot and the drinking and the drugs was going to be this overwhelming temptation that I would succumb to. There wasn't even a conscious thought behind it. But when you, Robinson, brought up the idea of what's next, living your life in recovery and truly living life sober, that came to my mind. Like, wow, this is the first time that I'm going to see this band since I've been in recovery. And the fact that I am completely 100% comfortable with doing that, and I'm not worried about it, I'm not thinking about it, I'm not having to prepare for it or anything like that, makes me believe that I have reached that level of enlightenment in my recovery where worrying about putting myself in those situations isn't something that I have to do anymore. And there'll be some addicts out there that go, oh, is that kind of cocky attitude that's going to get you to relapse, my friend. You need to watch it with that shit. I don't disagree with you. I just know that my recovery is strong enough that I can put myself in that type of a situation without having to fear that situation. But I also respect my sobriety enough to know that should I become uncomfortable, or should I put myself into a dangerous situation, I know better than that. And so I will go tomorrow evening to see my very favorite band play for the first time in a long time. And I will enjoy myself, and I will be sober, and I will remember the show from start to finish, and I will bring my children with me, and I will have an amazing time.
Dave Matthews eventually will hear this podcast.
Oh, of course. I'm sure he's listening live right now.
Well, so what do you want to say to him?
Please play the song Halloween tomorrow night, and I could die happy. Thank you. He's my Todd Rundgren to you, Robinson. He's my Alice Cooper. So,
If I may.
yes, please. Oh, please, very much.
Okay. I really like what you brought up about this whole respect thing. And I think there may be a part that we're missing it as well. Is it truly your recovery or sobriety that is in need of that respect? Or is it the thing you are coming from? For instance, when you were talking about it had to be the knife you were respecting, not your ability to wield it. In other words, the moment you stop respecting it, that's when you would get cut. So the moment you stop recovering, what's your recovery going to do to you? Really, it's about respecting that other thing and seeing what it can do, and then being in that place, with it, and being able to resist it, but nevertheless, because you respect it, rather than, say, completely fearing it and running away or fighting against it. The feeling that I can give to that, as far as having felt it in real life in a non-metaphorical sense, was when I was diving with sharks in Tahiti.
You did that shit?
I've got videos of it on Facebook.
You're crazy.
Seriously, I do. When you are there with them in the ocean, you have to respect them because you are no longer the apex predator. And the moment you stop respecting them and start fearing them, they are able to pick up on that fear and they will become afraid. When they're afraid, they attack. So when you are there, you must respect what is there because you are in their home. It is a dangerous thing that you respect. You respect that thing, and it is dangerous because the moment you stop, it will harm you. That's the same for the knife. It's the same for an addiction. That's the same for mental states. The same for sharks.
In many languages, fear and respect are the same word.
Yes. And they are very related. You can respect what you fear. Absolutely.
That explains so much about my father.
Yeah.
That son of a bitch.
And I mean that could be also for people too.
I love it.
So what's next?
So what is next? And I think that question can't be answered by one person and be the end all for everyone.
No, it's not supposed to be answered.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be questioned.
And I think the important thing is when you're in early recovery and you have people sponsoring you or mentoring you, or you're in a program where you have a professional counselor or something like that helping you, one of the first things they're going to tell you to do, and why so often addicts are ripped out of their home environment and sent off to rehab somewhere else, for some reason Malibu or Prescott.
I was just going to say.
It's because they want to keep you away from the people, the places and the things that were a part of your life while you were using. And I don't think that that's a bad idea entirely. But there has to come a point, and this is the part that's different for everyone, there has to come a point where you can face those people, places, and things without fear. Without...
With a different tool.
Right, without the concern.
What you use to fix a problem. There's a problem, you need a tool. And if you don't have the tools, then you fix it by drinking, or you fix it by getting high, and it makes it go numb. And it's no longer a problem. And that's what recovery going away is. You're going away and learning to discover new tools so that you can face the problem with a new enlightenment instead of not having to use only the one and only tool that you know. You now have other options.
So let's say, for example, Robinson, that I used copious amounts of drugs and drank gallons of alcohol with you. You were my drug friend. We used drugs together. We were addicts together, and we both got clean and sober. And it's fast forward a couple of years, and I have avoided you for all of these years because I've been afraid to spend time with you because you equal using. And there are millions of people who have those partners. There would come a point, there should come a point where I would be able to call you up on the phone and say, hey, let's go have dinner. And I should be in a place in my recovery that is both strong enough and aware enough that that should cause me no fear and it should bring me no harm.
Yes, there is a point.
I think that point might be when you no longer associate using neither drugs or alcohol with Robinson, and that way it does not enter into your mind whenever you're around him. So really that has to happen on your end, insofar as how you associate that person with whatever it is you are dealing with at that particular point in your life.
I think it comes from having a wider self-perspective too. When you
Okay.
can see the big
Yes.
picture of before you became an addict, when you became an addict, why you became an addict, how you stopped becoming an addict, and how you are not going to become an addict again because you now know the big story. You can see the big picture of the past, which helps you to see the potential future.
Ooh.
That's
I like
called
that.
resiliency.
That's what's next,
It's
is
called-
your potential future.
Mhm.
And if you don't have a plan, what do they say? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So get a plan. Once you reach that point where you can see the big picture, you need to make a plan on how you're going to stay sober and what you're going to do with your life instead of being an addict.
And
Whether it's a 6-month goal or a 5-year or 10-year goal, have a plan instead of having the plan of today I'm not going to drink. That's a great plan, but that's a very short plan, and you have to stick with that plan until you're past it. And then you can think a week in advance. Okay, I'm going to get a job this week, or I'm going to take a shower this week. Just whatever that next plan. You have to have a goal, a plan, a future, an intent.
which,
Have some intention.
and I think that gets lost so often in conversations with addicts in recovery. that the whole concept of one day at a time can often get in the way of having those plans or having those goals, because you think that, well, if I'm truly living my my new life one day at a time, then I couldn't possibly make a goal for a year or a month or 10 years in the future, because that's going to result in my failure and my relapse. So how do you do both without them contradicting each other?
Well,
They don't have to.
yeah.
They don't have.
By understanding, by looking at your past and acknowledging that you've learned from your mistakes, and that they weren't in fact mistakes, that they were lessons, and that your life is full of lessons. That when you come, when you're facing your forward moving challenges to to get to whatever is next, you don't see those challenges as mistakes. You see them as lessons, and you move on because you've learned that tool. That's cognitive therapy, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to build on that, as far as like you talked about them contradicting each other, from my experience with the different recoveries in mental health and substance abuse, time is a central figure in substance abuse recovery. Time measures pretty much everything in that field, at least. Um, for instance, one day at a time, and then sobriety is measured in time, which you receive
How
certain
many
tokens for
days
and
do
other
you
things like
have?
that.
Yeah.
It's
The
exactly,
coins, the
precisely.
tokens.
And
Yes.
so I think that concept, like you were saying, um, the concept of time itself can get in the way of that progress and in the way of the recovery if you think about it in only one scale. Instead of seeing it as, yes, I can do this one day at a time, you know, but at the same time, I can do this. And at the same
Exactly.
time, I can do this. So it's not one thing or another. It's building and building on different scales and scopes. So it's not necessarily seeing, uh, what is it, lateral. It's more or less seeing holistic.
Very
And
good.
that really
I
stops
like
it
that.
from being, that contradictory, and that really gives that direction. So,
Wise words, my friend.
thank you.
And we all are living our lives one day at a time. We can't
Of
live
course we
tomorrow,
are.
because you might get hit by a
Yeah.
bus today. You don't fucking know shit about what's happening
hmm
tomorrow, but you can still have a plan for tomorrow
hmm
in case you don't get hit by a bus.
Which hopefully you don't.
It's
Hopefully.
pretty unlikely that you won't, or it's pretty likely that you won't.
It's pretty unlikely that you won't, because you're going to be riding a bus tomorrow, listener. You just probably freaked out like 50 people. They're like, oh shit, I'm
Yeah.
not getting on that bus.
So, yeah, what is next? I mean, what was your goal and your dream in life before you became an addict? What were the things that made you live life and enjoy life? Think about that.
And do you still want those?
Do you still
Is
want those?
that
Are you
still what
still?
you want?
Yeah, I mean, there's always things that bring you some joy, even if it's getting on your bicycle and taking a bicycle ride on a mountain. Maybe you used to do that when you were a kid, and you can just have that good feeling again you know for the day. And your goal is to get to the top of that mountain and then come back, and then hopefully you won't get hit by a bus. But it's just it's rediscovering those feelings that you enjoyed before, re-examining your past, and seeing if you can use them in the future. I used to run every day. I can't run anymore. I can, and I should, but I don't, because I'm just like, my head's all over the place and I'm doing a million things. And if I get myself out on the trail and start running, oh my God, I'm going running tomorrow morning.
Good
Yeah,
man.
I need to do that. I'm glad we're having this talk.
A lot of
Yes.
people have this inherent fear of getting sober, not just because of the withdrawal, not just because of what we've talked about in the past around losing that best friend, right? Because let's be real, to a lot of people, the drink or the drug has become their only friend. So we get beyond the withdrawal. We get beyond the losing of the companion, the friendship. But we get to that place where we fear the future because it's this unknown. What will my life be like sober? And you can think about it short term and get yourself all amped up that I'll be able to do this now. I'll be able to do this again. I'll be able to get a job and, buy a car and find a girlfriend. But when you start thinking a little bit further out, reality hits you. And you start worrying about staying sober. You start worrying about, well, if I get a girlfriend, then I can't just be selfish and think about myself all the time. Or if I get a wife, then I might have kids. And if I buy a car, then I'm going to have a car payment. And if I have bills, then, oh my gosh, I have so much more to lose. And I know that might sound foreign to somebody listening who's never been in an active addiction, because wake up, that's life. But realistically, when you've gotten so bad into your addiction that it really is the only thing that you're concerned about in the world anymore, adding 50 things to your plate of concern, of daily consideration, can be a pretty terrifying prospect. So when we talk about what's next, and when we utilize the concept of one day at a time, the one day at a time concept is so that we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew when we are vulnerable and fragile and early in recovery. So for people that are listening that are early in recovery, keep in mind, biting off more than you can chew. We're not implying that you should jump right back into full-blown life. What we're trying to do is remind you that there is life after recovery. And that life includes your recovery and sobriety. And you will never fully be cured of this thing we call addiction, because out of nowhere, shit can happen. And I literally just reached out to a woman this evening on Facebook. Rachel and I were laying in bed before the show started tonight. And she rolled over and she showed me her phone. She does this often, and usually it's just some, like goofy cat video. But this was a big, long Facebook post of text. And it was from a woman. And above the text was a photograph. And in that photograph stood 3 people, a woman probably in her 30s, and 2 young children standing next to her. And in the background, not the distant background, but right next to them in the background, was a casket. A casket with a young man laying dead. And her post, that was a good couple paragraphs long, started out with an apology for the morbidity of the post and the picture, but went into a story about why she posted this picture. Because the picture was of a gentleman named Mike, who I don't know these people. But Mike had apparently been battling a drug addiction. And what started out as an addiction to prescription pain medication developed into an addiction of using heroin, which turned into rehab, sobriety, recovery, a toothache, which equaled pain medication, which equaled relapse, and then overdose, and then death. And I thought about that, and I said to myself, wow, this guy, from the story, this guy was sober for a good few years. He had gotten his life back, and his family back, and his friends back, and his job back, and all these things that he had lost while he was out there using. And then what happened? He gets a cavity, and all of a sudden he relapses and ends up dead? But what I realized happened is what happens, unfortunately, every day. He didn't have that plan that we were talking about. He lost the respect for his recovery, like we were talking about. And in the story, she said that when he started on those pain pills again, and everybody saw it happening slowly but surely in front of their eyes, he went back to the old habits of trying to convince everyone that he was fine and that he would never go back to the hard stuff and that he just needed to taper off the pills and get back to a good place and get back into recovery. Well, you should go to rehab. Nah, I've been through rehab. I have all those tools. Just give me a chance to use the tools. I'll be fine. And now he's dead. And this happens every day. We just don't hear about it. So. Well, and so part of the fear of getting sober is the fear of relapse. Imagine that. What's the fucking point if I'm just going to end up relapsed and overdosed and dead like everybody else? And with that mindset, yeah, what's the point? There is no point. Don't do it. Don't bother. Go jump off a bridge. But
so maybe a good plan for him would have been to keep his sponsor's number in his phone.
Or
anticipate these things. That's a good plan.
Anticipate the relapse. Anticipate. I have a plan in place right now, gentlemen.
Yes, your ICE, in case of emergency.
I have a plan in place with my primary care doctor that if I needed to undergo surgery, oral surgery, appendix surgery, what the fuck ever, I have a plan in place for what it will look like for me to get the treatment that I need and the pain medication that I would require that would not result in a relapse. But
because
we bring it back to vulnerability.
Yes.
And I had to have
opioid.
Right, and I respect my addiction. And I had to, I mean, shit, I'm a fucking drug addict. And a drug addict, you want to know where my brain went initially with the prospect that I was going to have my wisdom teeth pulled out sometime in the next couple of years? My brain went straight to, ooh, opportunity. Opportunity for a binge. Completely sanctioned by my doctor, my dentist, and nobody would be the wiser. But with that respect came the conversation with my doctor as to what that would look like. I carry a card in my wallet that hopefully if I ever got into a car accident and I was incapacitated, the card in my wallet specifies to the emergency personnel that I'm a fucking drug addict and that shoot me up with 1,000 milligrams of morphine is not what I want them to do. Please don't do that.
That's a good,
Contact my doctor.
excellent.
Yeah.
Kudos
Does that
to
mean that
you.
I'm weak and that I fear relapse? So
Yes.
the latter, absolutely, I fear relapse. But it doesn't mean that I'm weak. It means that I'm realistic and that I respect the fact that if I go back down that road, I may not come back. And I guarantee you, this gentleman, Mike, and I'm sure he was lovely, and it is a tragedy that he died. But I'm sure that he weaseled his way into the Vicodin that he started taking when he had his toothache. And he never called a sponsor. He never talked to a doctor. He didn't tell his dentist he was a recovering heroin addict. And he was off to the fucking races. Which was the same thing that happened very recently to one Steven Tyler of Aerosmith.
That's right.
Broke his leg. Opportunity. Prescribed me the pain medicine. Thank you, thank you. And, oh, he even went as far as to give the bottle of pain medicine to his wife or daughter or somebody and said, I'm supposed to take one of these every 6 hours. Please take them from me. One every 6 hours, please, no more. But they went to sleep. And he scampered over to the medicine cabinet in the middle of the night and said, oh, there's a whole bottle of pain pills over there. So, thankfully, Steven Tyler realized quickly, okay, not doing this again. The gentleman from the story did not. And he started telling the lies not only to his family, but to himself again. So, when I think about what's next, it always includes my sobriety. But it doesn't center around it anymore. And I enjoy my life. And I enjoy my kids and my family and my stressful job and doing this show. And if the day comes where relapse is knocking on my door, I hope that I have the support in place and the friends like you guys and the wherewithal to say, no thank you. And potentially have Robinson there to punch me in the throat and tell me to pull my head out of my ass. And I reached out to this woman who posted this post about this gentleman in the coffin. I reached out to her from the Sober Happy Hour Facebook page. I reached out to her and I asked her if she'd be willing to come on the show and tell his story and tell her story. I haven't heard back yet. But I really hope that she reaches out and that we're able to get her on the show. Her post was public on Facebook. I really hope she comes on this show. I would love to talk to her about that experience and what it looked like when he made the decision to get back into the shit. And how quickly it happened. Because my guess is it happened quick. Like relapse to dead within a couple of weeks. That's my thought.
Real quick, we have a comment from Nathan Vasquez on YouTube.
We do?
Yes,
Cool.
can you read that?
I just hit refresh.
It's down below.
I'm looking. It's refreshing. I think I broke it. Nope, not broken. How the fuck do I get to it? I don't even know how
Can
to
you
get to
read it, Robinson?
it. Yeah, I still want to know how to get to it. I'm very excited by this.
Okay. Well, vulnerability comes up in addictive behavior outside of drug use, like eating disorders. They fall into the same vicious cycles as well as feeding off the same and need for control. What do each of you as the catalyst? Which do each of you see as the catalyst that makes the initial vulnerability and turns it into such a major internal power struggle?
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
we're right at the end of the hour.
and that's fine. So we can give our concise answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let either one of you go if you have your answer.
Can you read the question again?
Read it one more time, Robinson.
I hate reading.
That's all right. It hates you too.
So the question is, what do each of you see as the catalyst that makes the initial vulnerability, that takes the initial vulnerability and turns it into such a major internal power struggle?
Fear.
Fear. I would say
Shame.
and I would say acceptance.
Yeah. It's that worthiness, that whole like worthiness and acceptance kind of
When
another thing happens with when we become vulnerable and in our rejection, things that are generally uncertain, that we all acknowledge as uncertain, like faith and religion. We have faith in certain things we don't know, but as a result of being vulnerable, we become certain there is a God and you're going to burn in hell. And there's people who that's one of those side effects of vulnerability. So maybe that has something to do with it.
I agree, and I think that it also has a lot to do with we're taught from a very young age that you have to do things that are acceptable. You have to do things that fit within this box we call normal. And if there are things that you love or things that you enjoy or things that you do that don't fit inside of that box we call normal, then discussing them, doing them publicly, sharing those things with people that are not like-minded is terrifying. And so I was able to pull up the question because I want to make sure I understand it completely. Vulnerability comes up in other addictive behaviors outside of drug use, like eating disorders. They fall into the same vicious cycle as well as feeding off shame and need for control. What do each of you see as the catalyst that takes the initial vulnerability and turns it into such a major internal power struggle?
That's why I said fear.
and I agree, I think fear, but I also think that acceptance piece comes in. I think they're similar things, especially around eating disorders, because so much of that is fat shaming and body image distortion, and you look at yourself as not good enough. And I think the same goes for a drug addict, that it was fun to use the drugs or to drink the alcohol at first. You were skinny, you looked good in a bathing suit, and then life happened and you something changed, your hormones changed, you gained some weight, so now you have this shame that Robinson talked about, you have this fear that Chaz talks about, you have this desire to be accepted that I was talking about, and it brings you to this place where you're going to hide this behavior from everyone.
Except an eating disorder is a tough one to hide.
It can be,
unless your eating disorder is bulimia,
right,
or anorexia or disorder.
Anorexia can be pretty easy to spot because of how emaciated someone can look. But I mean, I remember watching an episode of I think it was Intervention, where there was this middle-aged woman who was eating $150 worth of fast food every day, but she was swallowing these like diuretic pills that was making her diarrhea it out all the time. And so she looked totally normal, but was slowly killing herself.
Yeah.
So that's crazy, right?
Well, I mean, logically, you're not giving your body the opportunity to use any of the nutrients you're putting in it. It's just flowing right through you. So.
Well, I would say that.
No, that's fine.
I would say that it's fear immediately followed by hope. In other words, hope for something better, hope for that acceptance, hope for that, that hope for that peace. So yeah, I would say the catalyst is fear immediately followed by hope, and that is the power struggle between those two.
Yes, yes.
And we all know how Robinson and Chaz feel about hope. So, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Nathan, for your question. We would love to hear your questions, your comments, your concerns. Post your comments on Facebook, on this YouTube post that you are watching right now, or you can even post a review, a rating, and a comment on iTunes when the podcast drops. We want to hear from you. Shoot us an email, soberhappyhour@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter. That's the fastest way, @soberhappyhour. The show tonight will post next Saturday for Radio Valencia. So right now, 10 minutes ago, you're hearing last week's show on Radio Valencia. This is exciting. It's kind of hard to keep track of. But we really want to say thank you for listening to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. That's it. We're done.
See ya.
For Chaz, for Robinson, I am your host. Find us here next week at 10 p.m.-ish on YouTube. And if you or yours is considering getting sober, I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Sabina. So, that was